Good morning, good afternoon, possibly even good evening, depending on where you're watching. My name is Kyle Shutt with Discovery Education, and I am thrilled to be up here on Tundra Buggy 1 on the shores of the Hudson Bay. And I'm up here because I was invited by Polar Bears International. I'm so excited to be here talking about polar bears. And you know what? If you listen really closely, get quiet, everybody. Okay, get real quiet. Listen closely. Can you hear that? Do you hear anything? You might. It's the faint sound, the pitter-patter of rain on the roof. Can you believe it? Very unseasonal. Not actually something we want to see here right now. We were hoping for some snow. But it is raining outside. We do have some bears. You're going to get to see those bears in just one moment. But before we get started, I want to share with you how you can ask questions, how you can interact with us throughout today's program. Of course, we're going to give an introduction to our panel as well. So, first off, right off the bat, please email questions to questions@pbears.org. We would love to hear from you. We want to know where you're joining from, okay? You can also use the hashtag Tundra Connections or Celebrate with DE. We know we have a ton of classrooms that join annually for the Polar Bears International Tundra Connections program, so you're used to watching this on that website, and that's absolutely wonderful. But this might be your first time, and you might be coming to us from Discovery Education, and we know that you often interact with Celebrate with DE, so we'll keep an eye on all of those for you as well. But we're really excited to talk about heat transfer today, to talk about how heat is a form of energy, right? And so to do that, I'm going to set the stage here, guys, and I'm not going to ignore them long. You're going to hear from them, I promise. But I want to set the stage because we have an activity, and this requires some thinking. Because our goal today is to make you think, to make you wonder, to make you to ask those really deep questions so that you want to learn more. We can't teach you everything today, of course, no. But we do have an experiment. So BJ, if you're willing to, let's zoom in. We've got 2 pieces of ice in front of us, and I want you all to make a prediction right now. Take out a little piece of paper, type it into your computer, wherever you're watching. We've got a piece of ice here on the white paper, and we have a piece of ice here on the black paper. I want you to make a guess. Which one, by the end of today's program, do you think is going to melt first? Okay, you're taking out that piece of paper, you're taking out your pencil. Which of these ice cubes will melt, or maybe not first, but melt the most by the end of our 30 minutes together here today? Have you made your hypothesis? You've written it down? All right, well, while you're writing it down, we do have bears. I mentioned that. There's a bear right out the window, snoozing in the kelp right there. He's just taking a little afternoon nap, and you know what? Why not? Kind of sleepy weather out here. A little rainy, just above freezing, just above 0 Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So with that, let's go ahead and kick over to our panel. Julian, would you go ahead and get us started? I would love for you to share, we're talking about our backyard today, right? Heat transfer, but also how that ties to your local area, your ecosystem. Can you share where you're from in addition to who you are and the work you do?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're joining us on the tundra. And we have a little snow out there, but like Kyle said, it's very rainy. So I'm Julian Reed, and I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. That's in the south or the southeast. So how many of you, raise your hands if you're from Memphis, or if you're from the south? That would be like Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Texas, all those different kinds of states. North Carolina, South Carolina. We could keep going. If you're from the south, and so coming from the south all the way up to the tundra is quite a trip. And in my backyard, it has been really hot and dry this summer. It's even going to be like 77 this week one time. It's crazy how warm it's been. And we would love to have rain like this because we haven't had rain for about 3 months. We're really in almost a drought. So I'm glad to hear the sound of rain on the roof again. But here I am from Memphis, out on the tundra, and now we can talk to some of the others. And by the way, I'm the director of the Tundra Connections program. And I get to travel around doing lots of things with Discovery and other organizations too. So it's so fun to be here, Kyle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Tia.
So I am Tia. I am living in Edmonton here in Canada at the moment, but really I am from Denmark. Denmark is a tiny little country in Scandinavia in Europe. And so the reason why I'm here in Canada is because I'm here to do polar bear research. I am a polar bear researcher. But even though I'm here, I grew up in Denmark, and my backyard there the temperature there it's never too warm, it's never too cold. It's a nice middle of everything, yeah? I love it. It's very close to the ocean. And also we have there's green grass, there are trees, there are flowers. It's a very flat country, and we do have all 4 seasons. So I guess that's my basic backyard
Yeah.
in Denmark.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's pass the microphone over to Flavio.
Hi everyone, my name is Flavio. I'm a climate scientist currently working in Colorado in the United States. But as Tia, I'm originally from Europe, specifically Switzerland, which is really in the heart of Central Europe. And it definitely is a country that has all seasons, although they are not as extreme as up here in the tundra. It's a very wet country as well. It's pretty green. It has glaciers in the mountain part of our country that are currently melting, but it's really a wet country. Lots of ice, snow, water, and a lot of vegetation. We occasionally do see brown bears, but they've become really rare over the last 50 years or so.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. Continue to submit those questions. Of course, you can interact with us. Some of you, even right now, are asking, what about that chat room? Why can't I interact there? We might be having a slight challenge today. They're working on refreshing that. But again, you can go ahead and email those questions to us, or of course, use those hashtags. And let's talk about all of those students that are joining, guys, because you're sharing where you're from. Of course, I guess I should share where I'm from. I'm from Pennsylvania myself. So again, yes, 4 seasons, east coast of the United States. It should be approaching winter here, fall-like weather, typically in Fahrenheit. It's probably in the upper 30s, low 40s, mid 40s as a high temperature in Fahrenheit. So what would that be? Probably about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, something like that. But even today I looked, and it's, I think, a high of 60 some degrees. So very unusual weather going on right now. And we'll talk a little bit about that, the difference from weather and climate. But we have schools that have all kinds of different weather in their backyard, guys. We've got schools here from students from Easton Elementary in Maine. Hello to Easton Elementary, thanks for joining. We have schools from South Carolina, Sullivan's Island Elementary. From Ontario, Birchview Dunes Elementary, North Carolina. Wonderful, wonderful. We even have schools from Southern California. And in fact, Southern California, we've seen the 7th graders already ask, how could we help support polar bear exploration when we live in Southern California? Well, I hope you're going to pay close attention, because that's the goal of what we're doing here today. That's what we want to talk about. And so let's go back to that idea of heat transfer, right? So heat transfer itself, of course, we know that heat is a form of energy, right? And that it's thermal energy. It's, the movement of tiny particles, and the faster those particles move, right, then the more energy really it emits, or it has, rather, right? So I like to think of my favorite example, which is, I love ice cream. You guys like ice cream? I love ice cream, but on a hot summer day, you know what I don't like? I cannot stand it when I'm eating that ice cream cone and it starts going from a solid, from that ice cream kind of frozen form, into that liquid running down my hand. It's annoying to me, right? But what does that have to do with why we're up here? Well, it has everything to do, because that phase change, as it's known, from a solid to a liquid, is exactly what's going on up here. And we're actually waiting for the opposite. We're waiting for liquids to turn into solids, to turn into sea ice. And so, Tia, can you talk to us about the bears, about this habitat, this backyard of Churchill, Manitoba on the Hudson Bay? And why are the bears here?
Yeah, so the bears that we're surrounded by right now are here because they're waiting for the sea ice to come back. They're waiting for Hudson Bay to freeze up. And, well, as you might be able to see on the pictures, there's no ice out there whatsoever. There's no ice, and it's actually raining when it should be snowing. So the bears may have to wait for quite a while yet for the sea ice to come back. And so the reason why they really need the sea ice is because that's where they will be able to find food. Out on the sea ice, they can find seals, and seals are really fat, so they're full of what we call blubber, which is fat on a marine mammal. And the bears really need this blubber. They need this seal fat in order to be nice and chubby and happy and be able to stay alive.
If I can interrupt, why is that bear laying there? Like, why wouldn't it, we see it's low tide, if everyone's looking closely. There's not a lot of water on the tundra right now because the tide is on its way out. Why wouldn't that bear go out and hunt seals right now?
Well, because the seals would be lying on top of the sea ice. And, of course, the seals will happily swim around in the water, too. But even though bears are really good swimmers, polar bears are really good swimmers, they're not very fast in the water, so they're not able to catch the seals in the water. They need to have that sea ice as a platform in order to be able to catch them.
Okay, really nice. And so, talking about the habitat, of course, Polar Bears International has some really good resources to learn about this habitat and even to see where the bears kind of roam throughout their ecosystem. They have the bear tracker. That's one of the things that you can get from their website there, and that really shows how the bears, as the ice does form, how they migrate all over the
How
ice.
quickly they respond to the sea ice when it comes back. It's incredible to watch. They can be here one day, and then within a couple of days, the sea ice forms just along the coast. It takes longer for the whole bay to freeze over, of course, but along the coast, you'll see ice can form, and it just takes a day or two, and the bears are gone.
So let's go back to some of those questions because we're getting so many. And that question from the 7th graders in California of, how does that exploration, or how does what's happening here matter to them? How does it connect to their backyard? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right, so of course climate change is an enormous, overwhelming problem for the polar bears and for many other species around the world. But there's also another way that you can see the very direct connection between what's going on in your backyard and what we see up here. And that's actually related to the water that we find here. So sometimes, people will have bugs, or they will have, what do you call them? Plants that you don't want in your backyard.
Invasive species?
Weeds or invasive species in your backyard. And
Yeah,
so
weeds.
pesticides are used, which is basically poison that you put on the bugs or on the plants that you don't want to have in your own backyard at home. And unfortunately, when you apply that to your garden at home, when it rains, that poison is transported into the ground. And from there on, when it rains more, it's washed out into the rivers, into the ocean. And then, believe it or not, no matter where you live, it will actually end up here. It takes a long time for it to get up here, but it will. And we see that. So some of the pesticides that you guys use, or your parents use, in their backyards, you can actually measure them in the bears.
No kidding. How
Yeah.
do you do that? Is that some of the work you do, or how does that happen?
That's some of the work that I do, and it's because a lot of these pesticides, these chemicals, are found in the blubber. You remember I was talking about polar bears eating seal blubber, seal fat, and that's actually because of it's concentrated up through the food chain. So unfortunately, a lot of these toxins end up in the seal fat, and then the bears eat the seal fat, and that's how they get all of it. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing with polar bears is looking at the effects on the health of the bears of these chemicals.
Okay, well, as a resident bear expert, we're getting so many questions, of course, about polar bears. If we can do maybe a rapid fire, a couple questions
Sure,
to
I'll
you,
try.
okay? So one coming in here right now, thank you again for sharing. We have Miss Yuska's class from St. Louis joining, 7th and 8th graders. Hi, guys. We have another question here from Elizabeth, wanted to know, how long do polar bears live?
Well, the females live a little bit longer than the males, but it's always, let's say, around 25 years in the wild.
Around 25 years. Okay, that's a pretty good one right there. All right, lots more questions rolling in here. About how many polar bears do you expect, or do we even know, have died or been born in this area in the last 3 years?
Well, the thing is that the polar bear cubs are born inside a den, and we can't see what's going on inside the den. So we can have a guess as to how many females go into the den, but we don't really know if they had cubs, if the cubs died, and then we only see them later on when they come out of the den, and that's 3 months after they went in there. 4 months after they went in there. And so they can have had cubs, and we never saw them.
Yeah,
So
well, and
really,
that
it's a difficult question to answer.
That gets the Easton Elementary School's question, because they want to know, is it true that if an adult male polar bear gets hungry enough, it will eat its cubs, or it will eat cubs?
They will if they get the chance, but only if they're really hungry. If the male bear is really hungry, and if the mama bear can't actually fight off the male, because she will try with everything that she has to keep him from eating the cubs.
So not a typical behavior.
It's not typical, but we see it happening more and more because the males are also getting skinnier because they can't get seals.
Yeah.
And so, of course, if there's a little morsel, they'll try and get it.
Sure. That makes sense. Well, thank you so much. Continue to send those questions. Let's shift here a little bit more because, Flavio, you do study ice and kind of the implications, climate change and so forth. Can you, again, real quick, just share what is it that you study? And then talk a little bit to us about this connection of water and ice. And especially we're talking about kind of ice in our backyard and how it's melting or not melting.
Yeah, I would like to do that. As mentioned, I'm a climate scientist, so I study this climate system as a whole, and with a lot of the changes that we've been seeing in the last couple of decades, we obviously start asking the question, what is going on? And one of the most prominent changes, and part of the reason we're up here, is the very fast changes that we see in the Arctic. I believe we have brought you a small movie to illustrate some of the things that have been going on in the Arctic, far up north of the United States. In this movie, we have sea ice, the important habitat for polar bears. And you see the white colors there illustrate ice that has been around for a couple of years. So it's rather old and thick ice. And the more blue the colors get, the thinner the ice is, the younger the ice is. And as you go through the 1990s, you see the numbers up there in the top left. You see that there is going to be less and less of this white old ice that is sort of resilient to changing temperatures and that hangs around for many years and provides a habitat for polar bears. And then in the 2000s, we again see this ice is moving, but it's going to kind of be less white and less thick. And this is really something we've been observing not only starting in the 1990s, but even a bit earlier. And then in the 2010s, in the last couple of years, as you can see, there is hardly any ice that is older than 5 or 6 years. So this really robust ice that is important for polar bears has been vanishing dramatically. As you can see, also comparing these two pictures. These are all data from satellites, so we're using a lot of high technology satellites to observe these places on the planet that are really hard to get to. Even to get out here to the tundra in Churchill was quite hard, and going up to the far North Pole, the pictures that you see in this movie, is even harder. And the reason why this is important and plays into what we've been talking about before is this is really about water, but it's important in which phase it is. So as we've heard before from Kyle, not only we, but in particular the polar bears out of the window of this buggy are waiting for water to turn into ice so they can go out on the ice. One of the other things that are important about water is actually happening all over the place, not only in the Arctic, but in particular in the US, is the availability of water for humans and agriculture. So one of the things we've seen in the last couple of years is increasing droughts. I'm sure the middle school from Southern California is aware of changes in droughts. You see a map here, I believe, of the United States, and you again see a number of colors. And the more red the colors are, the more dry, the drier this region is. And you see, for example, Southern California currently is in a very severe drought. There is very little water, and the reason why this is important is this region is really gets most of its water from snow that falls in winter onto the mountains and is stored, and then it melts in summer when everybody uses the water to water their lawns, to do agriculture, to drink it when it's warm. And if climate is warming up, then all of this water is not falling as snow anymore, but instead it falls as rain, and we can't store it from winter until the summer when we need it the most. So this warming planet has implications not only in the Arctic with the sea ice that most people are familiar, but it starts to also show its impact in regions where everybody lives, like the United States, particular Southern California. So this is really a critical thing to understand how climate change affects the water cycle, because water connects us all.
And we would really love to hear if that's the behavior, or behavior perhaps the wrong word, but if that's what you're observing in your schools, in your backyards, tell us. You can, of course, send questions, but you can send comments to that email inbox or to those hashtags. Tell us, are you in a drought right now? Are you observing some of these things? Because it is fascinating. We had that conversation, I think it was just yesterday, where, of course, sometimes in places, they might not be seeing that. They might be seeing the opposite. Right, that it's really this kind of uncharacteristic behavior. right now, looking out on the ice there, typically this time of year, Julian, I think we should be seeing some ice, shouldn't we?
know.
Yeah, it's a little different for the middle of November.
It is. And back to the drought for a second. Texas had a really bad drought. If any of you are down in Texas, you know about this just a couple years ago. And so if you were in Austin, Lake Travis, which is this huge, gorgeous lake, was like a dry riverbed almost. And now it's filled back up again, but it's moved to Tennessee, unfortunately. So now we have the drought. So it's really interesting how that weather pattern changes, like you've talked about, Flavio. So as far as out here, coming for 11 years and seeing this, I don't remember seeing rain this late in the season. So right now we should see ice, and the ice should be forming, just like Leah said, and be ready to go with Thea said, and be ready to go out. The bears should be ready to go out on the Hudson Bay and start hunting, because they like to lie by the holes, the sea holes where the seals come up and breathe, and they lie there and just get ready to pounce. And when they come out of the water, they pounce and grab that seal. And right now they can't do that.
Yeah, of course it's good for us, because just like that bear they're watching right now kind of taking a snooze, we are getting to see a lot of bears. In fact, this morning we saw some bears sparring or kind of play fighting. And although it's really good for us, it's not so good for the bears, right? The ice continues to form later and later each
Exactly.
year. Now the good news is it looks like, according to the weather forecast, give it a couple days and the
Yes.
temperatures are going to drop, and we really do hope the ice will come in and will start freezing over. So let's go back to some more questions around that. Speaking of ice, really good question here. I love questions about adaptations. So can we discuss the adaptations of polar bears and or their inherited versus behavioral characteristics? Let's stick with the adaptations question more towards the ecosystems if we can.
So how polar bears are adapted
How are they
to living in
adapted
the
to live here?
Arctic?
Correct.
Well, first of all, they're really good at getting very fat, if they can. If they do have seals, they can get so fat that they can hardly walk. Unfortunately, we don't really see that anymore, or very few very, very fat bears, but they can. And if you're up here and it's winter time, it's dark and it's very, very cold, you need that fat to stay warm, to stay alive. Also, they are actually quite good swimmers. So if they're out on the sea ice, but it's kind of broken up, so you have these large ice floes, they're really good at swimming in between them. They kind of just drag their hind legs and use them as the rudder, and then they do the doggy paddle, like I'm sure many of you have done when you've been out swimming. What else? Oh, they're amazing in so many different ways. Their whole skull is just perfect for eating seals. Even the shape of the skull, their teeth is optimized for it, or are optimized for it. Their feet are amazing.
How old do you think the polar bears, as they get that, we're getting so many more questions, how old do you think some of these polar bears, like the one they're seeing right now, how old would you guess that?
The one we're seeing right now, it's an adult, so somewhere, I'd say between 10 and 15 years,
Okay.
something like that.
All right, so now we have some props to show.
I just wanted to show you this. Can we see it? It's a cast of a polar bear foot, and you can see that actually it has very hairy feet. And also on its foot pads, it has these tiny papillae. It's like tiny suction cups that it has under its foot, so that it doesn't really slip and slide when it's out on ice. Because it's on ice as much as it can. And it also has these claws. They're fairly short if you compare them to a grizzly claw, because if they were really long, it would be kind of like walking on the sea ice in high heels. And you really don't want to do that. So they're fairly short, but they're very sharp, so that when they do find that seal, they can drag it out of the water and they can tear it open.
Very cool. Well, so many more questions here. I love this one. Lunsford Middle School. I love it when people ask for things because I like to deliver. What can I say? So I'm supposed to say, and I can't wait to say, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Go Lunsford. Shout out to Lunsford. Yeah. Thanks for joining, guys. That's awesome. So they wanted to know, have you ever touched a polar bear, Paul?
Yes, I have. I've worked with bears in different parts of the Arctic, and so here in Canada, it's been with bears that are sedated. So yeah. And actually, the first time I was very close to a sedated bear was I wanted to know how it smelled. So I buried my face in the fur. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, I did. And then, of course, I also had a look at the paws and just in general. Yeah.
We're getting so many questions. We're going to ask some more for sure. But there's been a lot of questions also about, is there anything we can do? If you're in, of course, places like Southern California in that extreme drought that Flavio was talking about, or even, we're up here and we're seeing that lack of sea ice. What can we do? And so, Julian, I'd love to bring you into this conversation. You do so much work with Polar Bears International around this because there is still hope, right? There's still absolutely something we can do.
Absolutely. And so don't ever think that the news is doom and gloom, because there are absolutely things we can do. And so we have something with Polar Bears International called Project Polar Bear. And with Project Polar Bear, you as students can go on and you can do projects in your own backyard. So you may think, I live in my city, in my backyard. How can I possibly do anything to help polar bears who live so far away? But you can, because what's affecting the climate up here with the polar bears is the same thing that's affecting the climate in other places. So you can see on the screen on Polar Bears International's website, and you can get to that, pbears.org, that you can go and look at what Project Polar Bear is about. You have time to join the project and do your own projects. We have a video that some students have made of a song they've created, so you can do lots of things. You can do a public service announcement, you can do a song. So we'll listen to this video for just a second.
Buddy, you're a bear, make a big noise, hunting on the ice, gonna make a big break one day, but hours wait, we food race, stuck in and waiting for them to wait. We will help you, help you. We will help you, help you. Buddy, you're a bear, make a big noise, living in the cold, gonna need ice to survive.
So now you'll be singing that song all day, I'm sure. We will help you. So it's polarbearsinternational.org or pbears.org to learn more about the Project Polar Bear. But little things you do in your house and your neighborhood can really make a difference. So just turning off a light when you leave a room, unplugging your electronics when your phone is charged, unplug it. That's called phantom power, and you don't want to waste electricity. Also thinking about things like not running the water while you're brushing your teeth and saving water conservation. So lots of ways you can do that. Recycle, buy recycled products. So don't ever think that just because it's so far away and you're only one person that you can't make a difference, because collectively we can all make a difference. And so it's a really good way for you to help the polar bears by working in your own area. And look at organizations in your area too. There may be organizations planting trees, working at your zoo. Lots of different ways that you can help the bears by getting involved in your community as well. One of the Project Polar Bear winners one year was made something called the No Idle Zone. And the No Idle Zone is when your parents pick you up at school and they're sitting in a carpool line and they let their car run. Well, they put signs outside their school that said, "Don't idle, turn the car off while we come out, and you're not wasting fuel and you're not emitting CO2 into the atmosphere." So every little step like that can really make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And of course, we started this program asking a question, and that question was, which ice cube, the one that was on the black piece of paper or the one that was on the white piece of paper, which ice cube would melt first? So we're going to come to that in a minute, but just in case, we want to walk through a little experiment that you can do with us. Of course, this is an activity we hope that you will do, and of course, teachers, we want you to know where some of these resources are as well. So many of the educators here on Discovery have been joining us, and they've been taking part and even perhaps watching on this website here, if we can pull that up from the computer. And there we go. And so, of course, we know that we have the opportunity to ask questions and submit, but scrolling down here, we have a number of classroom activities, including this classroom collaborative project, Heat Transfer, the Great Ice Melt. And if you open that project and you sign into Discovery Education, we have resources to learn more about heat transfer, because again, that's our goal. We're trying to talk about how the exchange of energy, even throughout the world, throughout the globe, is so important. And so, of course, we have some information, some links, some resources, some videos even to watch to learn more about what a phase change is, right? But powerful thing about this project is it lays out the investigation for you. So teachers, you can get the materials similar to what we have, maybe a few more materials, but it walks you through what you can do with this activity, how you can actually set it up, how you can take your pieces of ice outside, right? You're going to record the temperature, and you're going to use this report form and tell us what your data is. Now, while I'm scrolling through here, Tia, I believe we were talking yesterday, and you really liked how first the classes could put their place on the map, and then of course they could continue to contribute to scientific research like this, because this is kind of the basis to research. Let's go ahead, I'll show the results page, and as I go there, Tia, can you talk a little bit about how this does compare and connect to the scientific process?
Well, actually, everything that... Sorry?
Go ahead.
Everything that you will be doing if you're doing this project is more or less the same that I do in every scientific research project that I do. You start out with a hypothesis, you plan how to test it, you find, not your pieces of paper usually, but you find your tools, you find out where you want to go, what you want to look at, and then you get your results, you analyze
supported
them.
by data, right? I love here too
Exactly.
that you can go ahead and see what some of these schools have predicted. Then you can see some of the variables that they included. You can even customize some of these charts so that you can include, locations, for example. If you just, when we get more data, especially, let's take a look at the data just from the northeastern U.S., right? Isn't that
That
pretty
is
neat?
very cool.
And so we really want more classes to participate and to submit. And even if you can't, that's okay. Still, you can do this activity, of course, at your house, right? Go ahead and measure the temperature outside, keep track and see how long it takes and what other variables, like maybe you'll put a piece of ice on wood or metal and so forth. So
This really
Go ahead.
is a science project. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the way that what we do are.
absolutely. So lots more resources for you to go ahead, just like they mentioned. But of course, this all comes back to why we're here. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists before we give the big reveal, and maybe we'll take 2 or 3 more questions. One thought, if you had to share, one thing that you thought was really powerful that students should know from your experiences up here, what might that be, Flavio? Put you on the spot a little bit here. What's been so just amazing to you?
Yeah, for me, it has been the first time up here in Churchill seeing those polar bears. So just seeing polar bears in the wild itself has been absolutely fascinating and overwhelming even. But really what struck me the most, I guess, is seeing those animals in these harsh conditions and how susceptible an ecosystem like that can be to change. So really we've been talking about the polar bears waiting for the sea ice to come, and you can really anticipate that if the sea ice is coming later, that they are struggling and waiting for this opportunity to hunt. So just seeing such a large and important ecosystem up life and the sensitivity of it to changes, that's really impressive, and I think I'm gonna keep that experience in my head and heart forever.
Yeah, go ahead.
That one is hard to top.
That's okay.
No. Well, there's so many things up here that are just incredible. But for me, it's a little bit bittersweet, like we were talking about earlier today, because you're up here and the polar bears are just amazing animals, and it's such a big experience to see them this up close, right? And I love Churchill to be here on the tundra because it's a really good place to do behavioral observations. But at the same time, it's sad, yeah? Like, I do... It's hard to not be very affected by it, because you see that the bears are really just... They're not really going anywhere, they're not eating anything. And also, and this is more on a visual level, because there's not much snow, there's no ice, they're a lot dirtier than what I'm used to looking at.
That was surprising to me too. I've been up here previously, but usually there's a little bit more snow and the bears are a little bit cleaner. They are kind of dirty bears
They
when
are.
you look out that window.
I mean, you can't blame them. There's a lot of dirt and the kelp that they're digging in. It all gives off color, right?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Julene.
Okay, so I guess some of my memories are or my favorite things have been the sparring. I love to see them up and play fighting, and that's how they kind of practice what it's going to be like to really engage in kind of a mating ritual later. I love to see them act like dogs, like
Look
this
at
one
that,
right
rolling
here.
around there.
Rolling around, scratching its back. They go in the water, they come out and shake off, and it looks like a big white dog. They have a lot of behaviors that remind you of your dog in your backyard. And I love to watch the mothers of the cubs. We call the cubs of the year coys. So that's a new vocabulary word for you, cubs of the year coys. I love to watch them walk around, and you will see the mother and cub all of a sudden take off running, and you're wondering why. And then about 5 minutes later, there comes a male. So they can smell from so far away that when you see one take off with the cub running, you'll know something's coming. Another thing is just kind of how what we call a spider crawl, which is not a technical term or a scientific term, but if the ice is really thin, they'll spread their arms and legs clear out and kind of shimmy on their stomach across the ice so they don't fall through. They're distributing their weight, so they'll just be kind of like a starfish crawl or a spider crawl where they've just really spread everything out like that. And my only other memory is we were here one time in a horrible blizzard, and that was quite fun. And I think we got our connectivity for our broadcast about 30 seconds before it was to start. But yeah, but that sad thing about that is it should be happening right now, and it's not.
Yeah, of course. Well, let me give a shout out to so many more schools joining, because I know you love it to hear that you're there, because we love that you're with us, right? So we have Panther Run Elementary in Pembroke Pines, Florida, Harrison Moorledge, third graders in Tucker, Georgia, Smith School in Huntington Beach, California, Miles Elementary in Tampa, Florida, Miss Banks, third grade in Tucker, Georgia, Kansas City, Missouri is in the house at Red Bridges Elementary, Cary, Illinois, we've already mentioned California, Ontario, North Carolina, Douglasville, Georgia, Chestnut Log Middle School, Mountain Brook, Alabama, Sammamish, I hope I said that right, Washington. Listen to that diversity. Alberta, Calgary, from grade 2 in Calgary, Alberta, St. Joseph. Listen to that lineup, guys. They are so excited. They want to hear you talk. They want to learn so much more. We encourage you to join us, because we do have another one of these webcasts, these virtual field trips, live tomorrow. And of course, we'll continue to tweet and answer your questions. But we're coming to the end here of our time together. Let's go ahead and take a look back at those ice cubes. What do we think, panel? Executive decision, which one? Do you think one melted more than the other? Executive decision here.
Black, it also melted faster.
Yeah.
The one on the black melted faster. Why? Why might that be?
I wonder what the students think. Maybe they should give us some ideas.
You're right. We hope that you'll tweet to us. Go ahead, share your ideas. Why is it that perhaps this black one melted faster? And if it was sunny and even warmer, or if we weren't under a roof, would it melt faster or not?
Yeah, well, I think about when we get dressed in the summer, what color clothes do we put on? We wear white, because it kind of reflects the heat and keeps us a little cooler. But in the winter, we tend to wear dark clothes like I have on today, because it kind of absorbs the heat, and therefore I get more warmth in my body. So I wonder if that has something to do with the color of the paper.
I think you're probably right. We hope that you'll try this experiment and you'll do a little bit more research. We're not going to give all the answers. That's not the fun of science. The fun of science is being inquisitive. It's asking those questions and really trying to learn as much as you can for yourself. So we're going to wrap up today. We are so glad that everyone joined us. Of course, we have some amazing partners that allow this to happen. Wirecast, for one, that puts on today's show. So thanks to Wirecast, because that's what allows us to bring in that live feed. That is live, that camera on the front of the buggy. Of course, the camera is where you're watching us, to be able to bring in these computer inputs. Thanks so much. Of course, we want you to know that you can protect polar bears. You can make a difference, so continue to do just that. Project Polar Bear is one initiative that Julene mentioned that you can go ahead and take part of. We also want you to join our survey. If you take just a few minutes, complete our survey, you could win a polar bear adoption or even one-to-one connection with your classroom. So thanks to everyone that's doing that.
And there's one more resource I want to share with you, and that's iTunes U. So if you look at iTunes U, Polar Bears International has a great source of resources for you there. Lots of connections about how you can make a difference, things that you can do to take action, because it's not just in the tundra that things are happening. They're happening all over the world. So we can look at ecosystems all over, and that would be a great project, connecting ecosystems. What are the differences in different ecosystems that we're seeing? You know, what's happening to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro's ice formation and as it's melting, what's happening in rainforests around the world. So all those things make a difference. So look at iTunes U and look for Polar Bears International and look at the great resources we have there as well.
Yeah, and really, again, this is just a starting conversation, right? We cannot possibly answer all your questions, and frankly, there are so many more questions than we have answers for, right? We hope that we've engaged you, that you want to ask just a few more questions and do some research. That was our goal today. Thank you for joining us. Most importantly, all of those students, all the classrooms, thank you, thank you, thank you. Kyle Schutt, thanking Polar Bears International for allowing me to be here, and all the Discovery educators that are with us too. Have a great afternoon, everybody. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. See you guys.